At 18, all I wanted was to be with a man. Though it's a bit embarrassing to admit at that age, I was still a virgin. What do you think about that? Is it wrong? It was getting harder to hide what I felt. I'm not talking about just meeting someone, I mean something more tangible, more palpable. That intense, human desire that consumes you at that age, you know what I mean, right? That need that starts to grow when you realize all your friends have had experiences and you're still a virgin. Yes, I admit it openly. At that age, I hadn't been with any man. And it's not that I didn't want to, because I truly desired it. It's just that, for some reason, the opportunities never came. Or if they did, they weren't the right ones. Why? Well, life had its own rhythm, and I wasn't exactly at the front of the line. My mother, for example, seemed to have a radar for any guy who came near me, which meant I didn't have many chances to go out with my friends, let alone meet guys, but the need was overwhelming. Every time I thought about it, something inside me stirred. I didn't understand why I couldn't experience it. It was as if the world around me was moving in one direction and I was going in another. My friends talked so naturally about the guys they had been with, and I could only listen in silence. Of course, I didn't say anything to them, but I felt it. Why did it have to be so hard? Why couldn't I be like them, enjoying those moments without a care? The answer was simple: my mother. My mother didn't let me go out much. I wasn't a prisoner, but there were rules at home. There was this social invisibility, as if being the youngest daughter meant my freedom had limits I didn't even understand. She said the world wasn't safe, that I shouldn't trust guys I wasn't sure about. And she said it with that protective look only mothers have, as if they know everything you need before you say it out loud. But it drove me crazy that I wanted it, I desired it. I can't explain it, but I needed to experience it. The famous first time. The one all the girls seemed to be enjoying, and that, until then, I could only imagine. It's not that I lacked experience in fantasies, because in my mind, the images of what a first time could be were vivid. Oh, how many times I had imagined that moment. The guys who passed by, those fleeting glances. If only they could last more than a second. If only I could live that moment, feel that sensation when you're close to someone you're attracted to. But it couldn't be that easy. My thoughts and desires were so intense that sometimes they scared me. What I wanted most was a guy who would make me feel things, who would take me and not let go, who would look at me with that gaze all my friends described with such enthusiasm. But it never happened. The opportunities never came. And deep down, I knew my mother had something to do with it. She didn't let me go to parties or stay late at a friend's house. There was always a reason to keep me from being in the right place at the right time. So I was left with my thoughts. And what thoughts they were. My friends, of course, didn't understand. What are you waiting for? Go out, have fun, live a little, they would say while talking openly about their encounters with guys. Some even laughed at my innocence, and I listened attentively, but inside, I felt a mix of envy and curiosity. Sometimes I wished I had the courage to tell them everything I thought, but I never dared. What would they say if they knew that at 18, I still hadn't had my first time? What would they think if they knew I was dying to know what it was like to be with a guy, and that, no matter how hard I tried, the circumstances never aligned? Sometimes I wondered if this was normal, if all the girls my age were going through the same thing. I didn't see why it couldn't be my turn. I didn't see why I couldn't be on the same wavelength. But there I was, with my mother controlling every step I took, every minute I spent outside the house. I had such a strong need to live my sexuality, to feel desired, to explore myself. The desire kept growing. Every time I saw a handsome guy on the street, I caught myself imagining what I would do if I were close to him. I imagined things, imagined experiencing those moments my friends talked about. It was as if my body and mind were in agreement, as if I were already ready to take that step. And not just physically, but emotionally as well. I knew that, at some point, things would change. I knew that, sooner or later, my mother's rules, the world's rules, would break, and I would be free to explore what I so desired. Sometimes, I thought that desire was more important than anything else in my life, that, somehow, my body was urgently asking for it, impatiently. At that age, I couldn't help but think that the world was spinning too fast, and I was just on the edge, waiting for my turn. I didn't know when it would happen, but something told me that when it did, it wouldn't just be a physical step, but a big leap into a place I hadn't explored yet. I remember how I felt when guys sent me messages. Messages on my social media, or even invitations to chat on some dating app. It seemed like the universe was giving me opportunities, something I had been eagerly waiting for. But no matter how much I wanted or needed it, there was always something standing between what I wanted and what I could do. My mother. It was almost as if she had a special antenna to detect the exact moment a guy was paying attention to me. As if she had a secret radar that activated when someone approached me, even if it was through a screen. At 18, when I thought I would finally be free, go out with guys, have my first date, my first time, my mother was still a barrier. And yes, I know, I'm a responsible girl, according to her, but I'm also a girl who needs to live, explore, discover the world, and above all, know what it feels like to be desired by a man. Every time I asked for permission to go out with one of those guys I talked to online, the answer was the same. No. Always the same excuse, always the same tone. It's dangerous, I don't know that person, I don't know their intentions. And no matter how much I insisted, no matter how much I begged, as if it were my last chance, she never changed her mind. You'll have time for all that. Not now. Each word was a break on my freedom. It was as if I were trapped, as if my dreams of having a date, going out with a guy, feeling special, were just that, impossible dreams. The worst part was that, meanwhile, I saw my friends going out, having fun, and sharing stories about guys who took them to hotels, who took them out to dinner, who kissed them goodbye, and I, meanwhile, was left looking at my phone, with a text message lighting up the screen, but with the certainty that I couldn't do anything about it. My mother didn't let me go out, and when I tried to explain that it wasn't about going just anywhere, but about being with a guy I liked, she didn't understand. For her, everything was a danger. Nothing I said convinced her that, of course, she thought she was protecting me, that she knew more than I did, that her life experience made her wiser and more cautious. And in a way, she was right, but there was also a part of me that felt like I was drowning. On those endless nights, when my mother went to sleep and the house was quiet, was when I felt freer. That's when I realized that, even if I couldn't go out to meet them, I could still talk to them. And so, dating apps, Facebook, and Instagram became my refuge. Through those social networks, I found my little corner in the world. I couldn't touch them or feel them close, but at least I could connect with them in some way. Those hours, when darkness enveloped everything, my conversations became bolder, more intense. Sometimes, I spent hours chatting with guys I didn't know in person, but who, in some way, made me feel things. Meeting guys through those apps was a mix of excitement and desperation. I wrote to them with the hope that maybe, just maybe, one of them would propose a real date, or at least make me feel like there was someone on the other side who genuinely cared. There was something about the anonymity of those messages that made me feel safer, but at the same time, trapped. It was as if, even though we talked without filters, I wasn't living my life. It was all virtual. At first, I felt strange. There were days when I felt like I was playing a role, or like I was living someone else's life. But then I realized it wasn't so bad. At least it was something. Something that connected me to that world from which I felt excluded. It allowed me to dream, to imagine, to feel like I was moving forward, even if it wasn't in the way I wanted. It was an escape. An escape from that life controlled by my mother's rules, who didn't understand what I felt, who didn't comprehend my need. The messages, the photos, the chats about everything and nothing kept me busy. Every time my phone vibrated, a thrill ran through my body. It was as if each message offered me an opportunity, even if it wasn't a real one. At least I felt desired, even if it was just for a moment. I felt seen, even if it was through a screen. With some guys, the conversations became more playful, more daring. In those moments, when I lay in front of the screen, I felt free. Sometimes I laughed alone at the things they said, at how they made me feel good without even touching a finger. And for moments, that was enough. But deep down, I realized it wasn't what I truly wanted. It wasn't enough. I wanted to go out, to feel, to see how they looked at me, to know what it would be like to be with a man, to feel that tension that only happens when two people are together. I have something to confess. And I confess that I'm a bit embarrassed to say it, but here I am, writing, telling my story, because I don't know what else to do. This isn't something from a while ago, not a past story. No, this is happening right now. And I feel a bit desperate sharing it, but I think it's the only thing left for me to do. Until recently, I thought my situation with guys was just a phase, something that would eventually pass. But no, here I am at 18, without having had that experience all my friends have already had, without truly knowing what it's like to be with a man, having that experience I've always desired. And yes, even though it sounds strange, even though I feel vulnerable, I'm writing it here because, deep down, I think I can't hide it anymore. And maybe, in some way, writing it here is the only way to free myself from everything I feel. The truth is, I feel trapped. Like a kind of prisoner, not just of my mother's rules, but of my own desires, my thoughts, the constant fantasy in my head. And sometimes I wonder if anyone else feels like me, if there's someone else who, despite being young, feels a bit trapped in their life, who can't live what their friends seem to be living so naturally. Sometimes I feel like all this is just a story to tell someday, but the day never comes. My first time never comes. I don't know, maybe by writing it or telling it here, something will change. And that's why I'm telling it, because, truly, I don't know what else to do. Every time I talk to my friends about all this, I feel a bit more lost. They tell me to relax, that everything will come in its own time. But what if that time never comes? What if I'm missing out on something I'll never get to experience? I don't have answers, only questions that haunt my mind. The worst part is that I wish I could meet someone. Someone to share all these feelings with, to have those conversations, but also experiences, to feel free, without worries, without filters. Someone who doesn't see me as a child, someone who sees me for who I am, for who I truly want to be. But here I am, searching, waiting, and with the feeling that the only thing I can do is keep writing and hoping someone will read it. So, if you're listening to my story, don't hesitate to leave me a message. Yes, I said it. If someone is out there and in some way is interested in what I'm saying, don't be afraid to write. Maybe this story will reach someone who, like me, is looking for the same thing. Maybe, just maybe, that message will be the first step toward what I've desired so much. Who knows? Perhaps you will be my first time. And don't worry if you don't know what to say. Any comment, any message, any word will be enough. Because I can't keep waiting without doing something about it. I'm tired of just thinking about it. I want to take the first step, even if it's small, even if it's just for a moment. Who knows what might happen? If you're listening to this, maybe it's because, in some way, you're looking for the same thing I am. And if that's the case, please don't hesitate to leave a comment. Maybe it's the way to find what I've desired so much. So here I am, sharing my thoughts, my fears, my desires. I don't know what will happen to me, but maybe, just maybe, something will change if someone listens, if someone dares to respond. After all, this is just the beginning. And who knows, maybe it will be part of my first moment. I don't care about age. I don't care if you're older or the same age as me. All I want is someone who makes me feel like a woman.